All right, so I would suggest you stay in the room because this is a panel you definitely don't want to miss. This panel is all about rescheduling. So if you wanted to know something about rescheduling, this is the panel to come watch. I am thrilled to be announcing our next moderator. She is one of the most brilliant women in the entire cannabis space. Every time I speak to her, I learn something new. She thinks about things the right way and has a great framework on how she approaches everything in this space. On top of it, she's one of the nicest, most wonderful people I've had the opportunity to meet. So I would love to welcome to the stage AnnaRae Grabstein of Wolf Meyer for Federal Noise or Real Opportunity.
Thank you so much, Lori. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Like Lori said, I'm AnnaRae Grabstein, and I want to bring out my panel. Come on, guys. Come on out. So I'll let them all get seated. We are going to start with some quick introductions, and then we will jump right in. This has been an incredibly big week when it comes to federal policy change. As I figure everyone knows, the rescheduling order dropped last week. The DEA opened registration yesterday for medical cannabis businesses. And we have an intoxicating hemp ban that's set for November. So there is a lot for us to discuss, and we've got a great group to do it. So let's get intros going.
Sure. Mike McQueeny. I'm a partner and one of the co-chairs of the Cannabis and Hemp Group at Foley Hoag, national law firm. We work with a ton of cannabis companies from inception, growth, sale, and everything in between. I'm also a professor of cannabis law and policy at New York Law School.
Thank you. Neil Prasad, I'm a managing director at CBIZ. We're a full-service accounting and advisory firm. We work with seed-to-sale businesses up and down many different states across the nations.
Hey, everybody. I'm Richie Proud. I serve as the Chief Executive Officer and Director of iAnthus. We have around 40 dispensaries across the country, Florida, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, opening up a brand new cultivation facility in New York, and we're getting ready to open up wholesale operations here in Ohio shortly.
And I'm Howard Lee. I'm the CEO of SōRSE. We provide the water-soluble emulsion for most of the hemp and cannabis industry, and I represent 30-some-odd team members. So,
amazing. So we've got lawyer, finance mind, MSO, and operator on hemp and cannabis. So I think we're really set up. Michael, I want to turn it over to you first. And if you could give the audience just a quick overview of what the heck just happened on the rescheduling order. And is this real? Is it signal? Is it noise? What should operators be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's real, right? I mean, you know, as I think I've heard a number of panels say, we met last Wednesday and we talked about what real and what wasn't, what timelines were, and then the next day that entire script got thrown out the window. So look, I mean, what happened was they figured out a pathway, right? I mean, I think rescheduling under the treaty powers was always assumed to be a bit more of a Hail Mary, but they threw it. It's out there, and what it did was it kind of bifurcated the analysis, right? So 2 orders got issued. The first said, look, we're going to recognize that any cannabis businesses operating in a state medical marijuana licensed model is now Schedule 3, right? That's marijuana and marijuana extract created by a license that's licensed by a state agency in the medical marijuana marketplace. That's definitively Schedule 3, right? So overnight, or however long it took to publish in the Federal Register, we went from at least medical marijuana being a Schedule 1 commodity to being a Schedule 3 commodity, right? Now the second part, right, is what happens for everything else, right? What happens to marijuana more generally? That's going to await the rescheduling hearing that's scheduled to start in late June. But true to the president's words from his executive order and saying act expeditiously, those hearings have to be closed by July 15th. So do I think July 16th, all marijuana, including marijuana that's been made outside of medical marijuana licenses, will be Schedule 3? Maybe not July 16th, but maybe by the end of the summer, right? It's coming quick, right? We were so concerned about how long it took to get there, knowing what the administrative process is, going in front of an administrative law judge, how long it took during the Biden era. Well, virtually overnight, medical marijuana itself became Schedule III, and I think everything else will follow this summer. Million different variables and questions that come out of that, right? How does the Schedule III model fit in a state-by-state basis? We don't have interstate commerce overnight because these commodities are legal only because they're in state medical marijuana licenses, which assume expressly or impliedly it's intrastate marketplaces. But brass tacks, this is major movement. And overnight, at the very least, medical marijuana operators got 280E off their shoulders and off their backs, and that's major developments. And I think we'll see even more of that coming out of the administrative law proceeding over the summer.
Just to set the stage for who's in the audience here, how many of you all are cannabis operators just around the country, anywhere? Okay, a bunch. And how many people are excited and optimistic about rescheduling? And how many are skeptical? Okay, so we've got some skeptics out there, but mostly excited. Richie, from your perspective as someone that is overseeing a broad and diverse portfolio of cannabis assets, how are you thinking about this? What's the opportunity that's ahead for you in your business and the industry?
Let me start by saying, Michael, you sounded just like my board. I mean, the day that this comes out, the phone calls start as to what does this mean? What are we going to do? What are we looking at? And I think that from an operator perspective, I think it's interesting for me, and the best that I can do is to tell you like how I'm approaching this and hope that it provides some element of context to how each of you are looking at this too. But there are three things that really matter to me. Are like, one, how am I going to execute to an unknown set of rules and principles? Two, how do I make sure that I continue to operate a business to the rules to which I exist in today, to where I believe brands really matter and continue to build brands in this environment? The third is, am I shoring up my relationships, and do I have strong relationships that exists across the industry, specifically the banking industry, because that's what we're interested in. So then as I start to peel that back, my first calls are to my legal team. What are the things that I need to pay attention to as it relates to this rescheduling order? The second are to the tax advisors. All right, let's make sure everything is in order. And the medical piece matters a lot to us because we operate in medical states. We operate a very strong medical business. And so we're looking at that very closely. And the third piece is, all right, we know capital is going to be a very big front and center conversation as it relates to this. We've all been waiting for capital markets to open in some way, shape, or form. And the optimism that I think we feel as business operators and owners is that there's a light at the end of the tunnel to where interest rates are going to look a little bit different at some point in the future. Access to capital is going to look a little bit different in the future. But like other things, not everybody's going to have access to what's coming down. And so making sure those relationships are really strong today matters a lot in how we're operating our business. So again, like recapping, am I operating effectively and efficiently? Am I still building the brands that matter to consumers? Yes, okay. Am I building the relationships that matter so that I can prepare for what's going to happen as more information comes down the pipeline? The biggest risk as an operator is that we always focus on shiny objects. This is another shiny object. It's got a little bit more meat to it, but it's a shiny object, and it risks taking our eye off of what's really taking place around the world. And so right now, those are the things that we're focused on. And P.S., I'm also focused on what Howard's doing over here on the hemp side so that I can get a little bit more clear understanding of those rules as well.
I promise we'll talk about hemp also. But let's keep on this rescheduling for one more minute or a couple more. So Neil, Richie brought up banking and capital and interest rates. Where do you think this lands? I will say before you answer that I've also heard people talk about credit cards this week. People are saying that once a company has a DEA registration, there should be a strong argument that they are compliant and able to bank at a different level, maybe even uplist onto American stock exchanges. Give us your thoughts.
All right, so just a disclaimer, opinion or anything that I share today is that of my own, not of my firm or my fellow managing partners or shareholders, and this is not tax advice or investment advice. So having said that, it is very much tied into the legalese, right? So it's not simple. Rescheduling that has arisen is not legalization. So I think it's also still going to have to go through a full CR or some kind of approval through the federal system for banking changes and so forth, so that access to credit card processing and so forth would be available to them. On the flip side, just to touch base on 280E, for example, there were a lot of companies that were, and it has made news already in the past, they were not recognizing 280 limitations. So those companies were parking their liabilities on the balance sheet. To the extent that they were paying taxes, then the cash flow is going to become available to them, at least on a prospective basis, even though I say dojo, but the order has now basically said the IRS should consider going back and looking at a potential retrospective treatment for that. So to the extent that that becomes applicable, it is going to likely give rise to additional working capital. But to the extent companies were not paying the taxes, it doesn't matter. It just cleans up the balance sheet. The liability goes away. The P&L doesn't have to reflect the tax expense going forward on a go-forward basis. And so I think from that perspective, from financial perspective, capital markets perspective, people are going to start looking at the P&L and balance sheet just like other regular businesses. And something that Richie touched based on was, as it relates to operating efficiencies, the last couple of years has really taught operators how to survive. There was no free flow of cash flow, free cash flows. So everyone had to get smart and wise about how they operated. And so that has really, I'm going to say, right-sized the operations, created some opportunities, and it was all about what happens after rescheduling, or access to capital. So I think, I'm an optimist over here. I think it is going to do a lot of good things. What happens in June or by middle of July, that may create a practical issue for operators between medical and recreational. Meaning, if you're a medical operator and a recreational, how do you now bifurcate your accounting for medical allocations of expenses and your recreational related operating expenses? And then how do you apply those into your tax returns or financial statements for that matter? So I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the rescheduling effort started under the Biden administration in 2022. And ostensibly, the Trump administration is kind of carrying it home now. Howard, you've been spending a lot of time in DC, and I'm wondering if you could talk to the environment and the point of view and kind of how cannabis, marijuana, hemp is being talked about in Washington, and what has opened the door for this change to happen, from your experience recently.
Sure. So, I'm not a lobbyist. And it's kind of like Mr. Howard goes to Washington. But the interesting dynamic right now is if you are in the hemp business, you are out of business in November. So there's a ban that's going to happen in November. So if you sell any hemp beverages across state lines, within state, most likely it will be federally illegal to have a hemp-based product come November. The second part of that is I do think states will have their hemp programs. So Minnesota, Texas, some of these states that have a large hemp-based product industry are going to still survive. So it's not going to go completely away in terms of hemp alone, but it'll be this horrible regulation or non-regulation and an uncertainty in the hemp market come November if the ban sticks. So what I'll also tell you is I have been to the White House, I have been to the West Wing of the White House, and I have heard directly from the White House that they want to get certain things done. There are various paths for us to get legislation done that will open a little bit of a window for hemp-based products. Now, I'll tell you, and I've been unfortunately called Dr. No, because if anyone who comes to me sells an edible product or a high-dose product in the hemp space today, I have said to them, I don't see a path that there's going to be any legal path to have a high-dose edible or high-dose beverage in market from the federal government. So they'll be effectively banned, which I think people like Richie and the MSOs want to have. Do I think edibles might have a sliver of hope? they have a very, very small sliver of hope to survive, and mainly because of CMS. I'm going to attribute this to Howard Kessler, but there's a program called CMS that could have a small window for edibles in that market. What I think a certain group of Republican congressmen and the White House have kind of coalesced around, which I think is what's passable, is a low-dose beverage, probably 3.7 to 4 milligrams per serving for 8 ounces is what we're proposing, and a smaller tax rate than some other people are proposing, so a small tax rate of, let's say, 3 cents per milligram. That program could survive. We think that's a possible way of legislating it through a CR. And if you hear from other people, and this is just my perspective, I don't represent anybody, but my company and my clients and my suppliers, there's other people in the industry who think that they're going to be able to bully themselves into extending the ban to go another year or two. None of that's going to happen from my understanding with talking to several Republican senators and congressmen. They want the ban to happen. They want to clean this up. They want to have age gating and so forth. So I think the interesting perspective that I have right now is there is a way to get hemp beverages done. I don't believe it will hurt people in the cannabis regulated market in Ohio or Kentucky. I think it'll actually be let's see, how do I use this word? It's a social THC or hemp-based product in the marketplace that will actually get people to be more comfortable with using cannabis-related products. The funny thing I was telling the panel here earlier is the White House does not want to call it cannabis, it's hemp. And I think they really are okay with low-dose products. And so we'll see if that comes through. But you'll know in the next 90 to 120 days. Rescheduling was a critical element of that. And so again, as we talked as a panel, these are great steps that are happening. So I am optimistic that something could happen in terms of instead of an outright ban, that will have a small window of beverages to start, low-dose beverages in that market. And again, to give you a little bit more context, I'm talking too much, but Prohibition ended with low alcohol-based products. So Prohibition had this horrible problem with moonshine and high-dose alcohol products, and the first products that were allowed was 3% alcohol products. And I think that's what's happening with this hemp market. The hemp market is boomed, but it has to contract to be able to become more regulated and legal and have a tax revenue attached.
Ohio is a great example of an industry trying to work itself out as it relates to hemp and adult use cannabis. Hemp got really big in Ohio, and as adult use has started to become more mature, there has been legislative action to try to stamp that out. Richie, your biggest state that you operate in is Florida, and that is a state where there is still a lot of active hemp retail close by to dispensaries, and I think you've had an interesting perspective on that when I've talked to you about what I would call it a dual use market with hemp and adult use or hemp and medical looks like in a way that isn't as negative as I've heard from other MSO CEOs. So I'd love to hear from your perspective if Howard's optimism is correct and the federal government does something to allow some incremental hemp to continue into the market, is that necessarily a bad thing for regulated cannabis, be it adult use or medical, or is there sort of a silver lining for regulated cannabis?
In today's world, we've learned to operate with hemp alongside of us, and we've learned to be successful with hemp operating alongside of us. And we've been able to watch how hemp has grown into the industry that it is today. We've been able to see the things and the tools available to them that we don't necessarily, as THC operators, have access to. And so I think when I look at the things inside of the hemp industry and knowing that I've competed alongside the hemp market for a long time, for me, coming from consumer brands and really loving the idea that consumers get to vote with their wallet and they get to vote with their feet, and it's my job to make sure I can tell a consumer why my products are better than somebody else's products, and I can try to connect with them from a lifestyle environment. Like, I'm intimately obsessed with that kind of idea. I've watched and learned how this has grown to be a big industry, how interstate commerce has been able to take effect, how e-commerce has been able to take effect, how credit card regulations have been able to be utilized in the hemp industry. I see it as like, well, the minute I get to have access to that, then game on. Like, I'm gonna go take you down because competition is now in my favor. I get to play by the same set of rules, and I think at the baseline, I just want to be able to compete on the same playing field that everybody else gets to compete with. And you know, MSO operators and THC brands haven't had that tool chest to work with. It's going to be exciting when we do have that tool chest to work with and to see how we're able to communicate with consumers on the benefits of our products the same way that we're watching it be communicated on the other side too.
Michael, to bring it back to you, we alluded to the fact that the DEA registration process opened yesterday, which is pretty exciting. There was a lot of people online taking screenshots of how they said it would open at 9, but then it was delayed and it didn't open right away. Are you advising people to apply as soon as possible? Are you filling out the applications for people tomorrow, yesterday, today? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Because, you know, I think the one of the fundamental questions coming out of the rescheduling order is brass tacks, marijuana and marijuana extract made in a medical marijuana license is Schedule 3. So what does the DEA registration actually get me, right? And I think that's a question that's still kicking around. And you know, I think from a 10,000-foot perspective, if you're trying to be compliant with laws, right? I mean, you talked about banking relationships. I wouldn't be surprised if most medical cannabis operators get a ping from their local bank saying, hey, look, have you applied for DEA registration? When we're talking about this with clients, you know, what we're saying is you should take advantage of this expedited period, right? So the rescheduling order said, provided you apply in this initial 60-day period, you'll be entitled to quote unquote expedited review with the hope that the DEA gets through that initial set within the first 6 months. All of you guys have dealt with state regulators. I have less faith in federal regulators that they'll be able to do that in 6 months. So what we're working with clients on is saying, look, you got to get prepared, and it is a bear to prepare for this registration, right? Bear in mind that federal rules say you need an additional registration for each location where you operate, right? If you're an operator down in Florida, right, where you have, you know, scores and dozens of dispensary locations, those are additional locations, right? You have to list all of your employees that have access to scheduled products, which is virtually every one of your employees at every one of your facilities. Now, the reason that we say don't rush into it, in addition to how much work goes into it, is there are some odd and I would say troubling questions built into it, right? One is, are you engaged in the sale of any recreational products, right? Why is that question in there? Is that some kind of flag that's then going to get sent to the IRS that said even when we're given retroactive tax relief, like take a look at these guys because they have mixed revenue there? The other question that they ask that I think is interesting or peculiar is, have you or your owners ever previously handled scheduled materials? Now, everyone who's licensed prior to the rescheduling order has been trafficking in Schedule 1 materials, right? Obviously, you need to answer accurately and truthfully when you're submitting this to the federal government. There's affirmations that are required. I'm somewhat hoping that over the weeks over the weeks to come, that maybe they get rid of certain questions, maybe they expedite certain other areas, maybe they tailor this back and say instead of applying per location, you can do it per license in the state or for one state license. I'm just holding out hope to hold out hope. I don't know if that actually goes there, but point being, you know, you don't get a gold medal for being the first person to submit your registration, provided you get everything in during that 60-day period. What the rescheduling order says is, as long as you get it in that 60-day period, you can continue to operate without that registration, right? The inverse of that is, well, I've been operating without this registration for the last couple of years, so does that mean the DEA is going to kick into my door? So either way, I'm hopeful for more guidance coming out of the DEA that maybe lightens the load. But either way, we are still advising clients that you have to get registered for compliance with laws or otherwise.
Howard and Richie, have you guys registered yet?
We were on the platform yesterday looking at these questions, and our internal debates are over the ones that Michael just mentioned. It's like, oh, this is a little uncomfortable. And so we sit down with our board, and we're going to have a good dialogue as to what the process looks like and the cost associated. There's also a heavy cost associated with it, so there's a big revenue grab there for the government. But we're very focused on what this is going to mean, but do believe that we have to do this very quickly.
So I'll tell you to wait as long as you can. And unfortunately, seeing how the sausage is made in Washington today, I think you'll see some changes pretty quickly here. I actually respect that President Trump's administration got it done, got something out the door, isn't going through its 1,000th revision before it gets released. And so I'm willing to take this pain of, these forms not being correct the first time around. I think the forms are going to change pretty quickly here, because I think the DEA is not capable of handling all of this information, right? And that, all of this craziness is happening, and it's kind of just being launched on these agencies, and so they have to react, and I think they'll react positively because they do want to get something done.
I agree that it is refreshing and surprising of how fast the portal opened. I think anyone who's worked in cannabis for a long time is so used to such slow incremental progress. And so when I got that 5. When we have seen progress in the past, even when you look at states that have passed legislation and then it will take 2 years before an application opens. And this was days, it's hours. So really amazing. I think within all of this, one of the things that I think is on so many people's minds, certainly mine, is that who is going to win and who's going to lose? Because within federal policy change right now, there are clearly going to be winners and losers, be it the winners and the losers within the hemp debate. Certainly, it looks like adult use is a bit of a loser right now compared to the medical states in some ways. And so maybe, Neil, if you could give us your perspective from the financial side, how much does this order, as it stands today, when we don't know what's going to happen from the hearing with adult use, is this really going to benefit the medical operators compared to the adult use folks?
Whoa. Look, I think the medical operators are definitely going to benefit, but I think the recreational folks are also going to benefit as well, because all they got to, I simplify it, but they can start directing the traffic to their customer base and say, go get a medical license, right? And from a financial perspective, more of the costs get expensed and deducted for tax return purposes, and that could provide a little bit more cash flow for them, provided they're paying taxes. So there's a little bit more strategic planning involved around all of this. But going back to, let's see what happens by July, right? See where the direction of everything is going. I'm not saying to sit still, but at least start thinking through some of these things, and at least, within this next 50 days is going to go really fast. And I think we're going to see some traction over here. So,
And I'll toss this one up to the group. A lot of what's going to happen after we get through the hearing and we have more clarity on what the federal program looks like is really going to be turning back to the state regulators of how they're going to metabolize the new federal policy. Like, I've heard people talking about everything from trying to convince adult use states to roll back and become all medical again, to creating interstate pacts for interstate commerce. And I'm wondering how each of you are thinking about your own next steps in terms of what is kind of tip of the spear to get involved. And maybe that can help some people in the audience think about how they can get involved too.
So, dormant commerce clause, right? So when a state has onerous rules that benefit the in-state operators to the exclusion of the out-of-state operators, right, that's a dormant commerce clause violation. My first conversations with a number of state regulators on this is like, one, you need to start harmonizing your rules, right? Which helps operators, right? So if I have to have 5 or 6 different sets of packaging and labeling because each state deals with something a certain way, if I have to have different testing standards state by state, that affects the business bottom line. So my first conversation with regulators was, you need to start figuring out where the middle is and start downgrading your regulations such that they're in consistency and conformity with maybe a more universal set. I'd love to see CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association, maybe propose a universal set, right? Because I don't think the Dormant Commerce Clause challenges are coming tomorrow, but they're coming soon, right? Of the barriers that maybe some of these states put up for health and safety reasons, for social equity reasons, or otherwise, I think they need to revisit all those to figure out, you know, what standards are there to, that are necessary for control purposes versus what standards are extraneous, costly to operators, and likely to face challenges moving forward.
I think the key word that I'm looking at 3 years from now is the word harmony. I know that sounds woo-woo, but I'm from Seattle. I think the funny thing that we have is we have the DEA regulating regulated cannabis. If the hemp bill that us and other people are proposing, or the type of it, the TTB will be involved. So we're going to have 2 different regulators trying to regulate the same plant, the same material, right? We have states doing certain things with their hemp programs versus their regulated THC programs. And it all has to be harmonized in the next few years. Now, we've been working for the last 6 months trying to make, you know, just getting some harmony within the industry of hemp, but there is no harmony, right? People want to do their high dose things, and I get it, but if we can only get this little thing done, can we get the next thing done and the next thing done, which is just kind of trying to harmonize all these different laws, ways to collect tax, so forth and so forth.
I'm getting the cue that we are done. So what I will just leave you with is that I think everyone should just hold on tight. We're in for a ride this next 12 months. There's going to be a lot of change. And if there's one piece of advice that I would give everyone is just to pay attention and learn as much as you can, because the more that we know, the better we can navigate it. So good luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Wasn't that panel fantastic? Let's give it up for Federal Noise.